It's August. It's August. You're supposed to be getting ready for football season, to watch football. But no, we're not. Still a good time to go cranking, folks. Weather's hot. You know, you're not gonna catch as many, but they still bite a big plug in August. And sometimes the DT-20 is exactly what they want because it's a little bit more sleek, not as invasive. You think they ain't dotted up? Right there he is. Oh, good and tight. I mean, it's just about timing with a 20 when you're working it because it's so much more subtle. These fish have seen so many baits through the summer. Every crankbait you can imagine, big ones, medium ones, so they get conditioned to it. But what I've always thought about that makes the DT-20 so much different than the rest of them is the body profile is a little smaller. It's made of balsa, so it's a lot more subtle. It doesn't have that huge, and you can tell he wanted it. You know, and this doesn't look like it would be color water you would throw chartreuse in because it's a little bit cleaner, but I just like to swap it up in the summer. But they're telling you, they still bite crankbaits in August, and the one you want to try out, folks, is the 20. It's just not as big. You can burn it, you cast good. I like it when you take the sound out. First thing that seems to go when fish get pressured is baits with sound. So you want to go more natural, and you can tell I'm winding it pretty good. It's a 7'9" rod, super, super parabolic. Good feel on that bait. 10-pound shooter sunline. It's concept A, 13 reel, 5/8 to 1. Pretty simple setup, but the speed kills. You don't want them to get too good a look at it. Hit another one. I'm hitting them. One thing you have to remember is even though like on this school, when I got up there, I could see several. You may not catch all of them on a crankbait. You're gonna catch a few and then they're gonna quit. It's because they've seen all their buddies get ripped out of prison. They're like, so they're pretty aware when fish start getting pulled out of school, what's going on. So you wanna hit them. If you catch a few, leave, come back in a couple hours, fire them up again. But you're not gonna sit here and burn them all down. They're not gonna let you do that. And you'll notice if you keep throwing in the same place, they'll move. They'll just start sliding up and down the ledge, and it's simply because you keep irritating them. And I want that bait beating and banging. I mean, I want to be causing a disturbance on the bottom. I think when it stirs that bottom up, you get that little bit of dust or like little flutter coming off the bottom. I think sometimes it helps hide that bait. So they run down there to see what all the disturbance is about. It's just about not letting them get a good look at it. It's funny, we want them to see it, but I don't want you to stare at it. You know, when you talk balsa crankbaits, it's a wood. It's a super buoyant wood. The baits hang like they machine them out of it, but it makes it float up nice, but it doesn't have that extreme rattle. They don't put like a huge rattle in there. It's very subtle. To me, it's more natural when you fish balsa, and I like that. Even if I'm fishing shallow around boat docks, it would be like I would want to, in August, I'd be throwing like ox bait, the OG, something super finessey, super quiet, simply because these fish have been pressured. They've been thrown at. So you kind of, as they get pressured, want to go more natural with your colors. Even in your plastics, you'll notice the higher pressure fish, they don't bite those bold fluorescent colors like you know, when you first spring, you can just come out and throw whatever color you want. They'll bite. By August, nope. So you always want to pay attention to that. Well, when you talk about why is the cast distance important, you hear a lot of pros and other guys talk about I need to be able to cast further. The distance of the cast has a lot of control over how deep the bait runs. This bait is designed to run 20 foot, but it only do that on the maximum length cast. It won't do it on a short cast. The longer the cast you make, the deeper it'll run, and naturally the longer it stays down in the strike zone. So that's why you always see guys striving to throw further and further, is because it helps them achieve depth. And I like a long cast. If the fish are in 15 foot, I'm throwing a 20-foot running bait, and I want it to get down on the bottom. If I can get it to run on the bottom 70% of the cast length, I'm gonna catch more fish every time. Because my bait is staying in that strike zone always. Versus it just barely touching the strike zone and then coming right back up. I think in August the fish is at his most keen senses anyway. Water's usually cleaner in all lakes. They've seen baits all year. The bait they're feeding on smaller due to nature. They're feeding on fry from this year. So naturally, I just think they're more aware in August of everything around them. Versus in June, after they spawn, they get out on the ledges, dude, they're hungry. They're just eating. They're trying to get back. That grass. They're just trying to get back healthy. That's why it seems like it's so much easier. It's just naturally in June, they gotta eat. Here, it's selective eating. They don't have to. They will eventually, but they don't have to at your present time. When you come to fishing ledges this time of year, it's not like in a typical summer pattern where they're on every ledge, creeks, everything. In August, they're a little bit more selective. A lot of times you're gonna be looking at something probably influenced by current or something that points out directly in a creek channel like this one does. They're not just gonna be on all that little silly stuff. They're gonna be somewhere with a purpose. So you're looking for certain ones, like, you know, tip of island where the current speeds up. Long points sticking out into the channel where they might get a little bit faster current. They're gonna be a little bit more selective. So kind of always remember that. Things that point into the current, point into the channel, probably gonna be your best August places. A lot of times they'll be in lakes where the lake gets narrow for whatever reason. If there's a place in the lake where it gets narrow, that's where the current will speed up. So there might be a whole section right there that's better than the rest of the lake. So there, gob right there. I can get this freaking grass off here for like 32 seconds. So really when you're like fishing at Guntersville, let's just go ahead and be real with it. You come down here cranking, I'm gonna be dead honest with you, wired to fish. 1 out of 16 casts is what you're gonna get good. If you can't handle the odds of that, stay home, because that's what you're gonna get on your bait. That's why so many people get frustrated and quit it, because you reel in so much floating eelgrass, it just feels like you're wasting your time, and it is super aggravating. So you just gotta know when you come down here and doing this, you're gonna reel in grass. You're gonna reel it in over and over and over and over. It's like you're gonna be in a prison sentence. You just try to play the wind. I've got it on there now. Like I didn't get 20 feet into it and it hung. So I'm probably gonna throw a jig in there. It's just what happens down here. You catch them on one, if the grass gets overwhelming, then what are you gonna do? You're gonna try to pick a jig up. And you're gonna blister because you can't get your other bait to them. That's a prime example. I've been going back and forth down that ledge. I caught one real quick on a 20. I couldn't get him to bite again. You know, I couldn't get the bait to him. It's all about presentation. I think they would bite it, but there's so much floating eelgrass. God, that buckeye jig's got him hooked too. And I can see them dotted up on 360. But you see this floating grass, that's your worst enemy when it comes to cranking. So a lot of times, if I'm gonna be down here in August, I'll have a big jig. This is just a buckeye, the big football jig they got. It's a mop style. I'll have it laying here because at least that bait goes down. There's no way I can get a crankbait through there right now. There's just no way. I think people think electronics are really important to find them, but let me tell you something, when you're dealing with floating eelgrass, 360 is your best friend. Because you think about how many casts you're wasting throwing in that grass, at least with 360 you can pinpoint them, reduce the amount of casting around and try to hang up in that grass, and then you can kind of like, if they're under there, 360 says they're right there, there's too much floating grass, pick your jig up. This particular area we're sitting in right here, it doesn't have the amount of current as some of this out here on the main river was. So like, if I'm gonna pick to fish this area, if I'm at the weakest current, I wanna fish at the lowest light. You wanna go, you can kind of set your run up, your milk run up, if you're there practicing or you're looking at an area. You get an area that doesn't have a lot of current on it, fish it in the lowest light conditions, morning, evening, cloudy weather, something to help trigger the fish. If it's got a lot of current on it, it doesn't bother me to go there in the middle of the day. So kind of remember that, lower the light, lower the current, higher the light, it's usually gonna work out for you. Grassed again. I mean, this is the real time, folks. You can't edit this out. I could sit there and say, oh, or never say anything about it, and they could cut all this out and you would never know. But this is something you deal with on the Tennessee River down in this area. There's a lot of eelgrass, a lot of floating grass. And when I tell you the struggle's real, it's gotten so, like, it's times it gets so frustrating. You hear anglers say, I'm going to Smith. They just want to go somewhere where they can throw and not get grass on them. It's just what you deal with. You kind of have to just build up an immunity to where you're just like, okay, I'm going to get it. It's frustrating, but I'm not going to let it dictate me going home. Now, it will control the baits you fish. Because I so want to throw my DT-20 here because I kind of found them with that here, and I know they'll bite it. But I have no chance in the world of getting this. So I picked the big jig up and I drag it in there. The August offshore fishing like this, we're in June, you may have 15 rods to go through. Like you could rig up literally 15 rods and you could work a school over. In August, you don't have that many options. You know, you're not gonna be throwing the Ben Parker 14-pound spoon. You're not gonna be throwing 20 different crankbaits. They've kind of got off the big worm. To me, when you get to August, it's pretty simple. You're gonna throw a jig, a little swim bait, or a DT-20. I mean, it's rare that I ever do it in June or May on the Tennessee River. There I come out and just throw one bait all day on deep school and say this is the deal, or ledge fishing. You're really not gonna do it in August, but you can still catch them. Just because it got hot, it's August, people are like, oh, these are the dog days of summer, man, and you've seen the ramps, they're not busy. I enjoy this time of year. It's a little more challenging. You know, when they're fishing at what people would rate as poor, it's not. It's just they're not going to let you throw the same bait. So you have to understand going in, you're going to throw a couple of baits. You're going to work the school. You're going to be pretty cautious of boat noise, boat positioning. All that will come to play. I love catching them on a 20, but I love catching them more.